Hi guys, and welcome to Global Crime Time. Like always, please smash a like on this video, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget the notification bell so you know when my videos come out. There's not many people you will talk to that have never heard of the Krays in some way, shape or form. In the late 50s and into the 60s, the Krays controlled the East End of London through protection rackets and other criminal activities, also making money through nightclubs that the twins owned. This video we will look into the major factors which affected the rise of the Kray twins and also the inevitable downward spiral of the Kray twins once the wall of silence crumbled.
Blood is thicker than water, you know, and I've been with Reggie since the womb.
Ronald and Reginald Kray were born on the 24th of October 1933 in Haggerston, East London, to Charles David Kray and Violet. The brothers were identical twins, with Reggie born 10 minutes before Ronnie. The twins had a 6-year-old brother, Charles James Kray, and a sister named Violet, who sadly died in infancy. The Kray twins first attended Wood Close School in Brick Lane and then Daniel Street School. In 1938, the family moved to 178 Valence Road in Bethnal Green. During the Second World War, the twins were evacuated to East House in Hadley, Suffolk, with their mother Violet and their older brother Charles. They stayed at East House with the owners Dr. and Mrs. Style for about 1 year before moving back to London. The influence of their maternal grandfather, Jimmy Cannonball Lee, caused the brothers to take up amateur boxing, then a popular pastime for working class boys in the East End of London. Both had eventful boxing careers in their youth. Starting out in the open-air bear pits of the Mile End Arena, they made it all the way to the Royal Albert Hall before turning to crime. Ronnie Kray fought 6 times, winning 4 by knockout and losing the other 2 by decision. Reggie Kray finished his boxing career unbeaten, winning all 7 of his professional fights. They trained at the Repton Club in Bethnal Green, which still runs to this day. The Krays were called up to do national service in the British Army in March 1952. Although the pair reported to the depot of the Royal Fusiliers at the Tower of London, they attempted to leave after only a few minutes. When the corporal in charge tried to stop them, he was seriously injured by Ronnie when he punched him on the jaw. The Krays walked back to their East End home. They were arrested the next morning by the police and turned over to the army. In September, while absent without leave again, the twins assaulted a police constable who tried to arrest them. They become among the last prisoners to be held at the Tower of London before being transferred to Shepton Military Prison in Somerset for a month to await court-martial. When it became clear they were both to be dishonourably discharged from the army, the Krays' behaviour became worse. They dominated the exercise areas outside their one-man cells, threw tantrums, emptied a latrine bucket over a sergeant, dumped a canteen full of hot tea on another guard, handcuffed the guard to their prison bars with a pair of stolen cuffs, and set their bedding on fire. Eventually they were moved to a communal cell where they assaulted their guard with a vase and escaped. After being quickly recaptured, they spent their last night in military custody in Canterbury drinking cider, eating crisps and smoking cigars, courtesy of the young national servicemen acting as their guards. The next day the Krays were transferred to a civilian prison to serve sentences for the crimes they committed while AWOL. The Krays' criminal records and dishonourable discharges ended their boxing careers, and Reggie and his brother turned to crime full-time. They bought a run-down snooker club in Mile End where they started several protection rackets. By the end of the 1950s, the Krays were working for J. Murray from Liverpool and were involved in hijacking, armed robbery and arson, through which they acquired other clubs and properties. In 1960, Ronnie Kray was in prison for 18 months for running a protection racket and related threats. While Ronnie was in prison, Peter Ackman, head of a violent landlord operation, gave Reggie a nightclub called Esmeralda's Barn on the Knightsbridge end of Wilton Place next to a bistro called Jones Kitchen. Reggie Kray acquired the Double R Club in 1957. The twins already owned a billiard hall on Eric Street, the Regal, and business was going well. The building was situated at 145 Bow Road and was in need of repair and redecoration. After gathering the needed legal paperwork and licences, Reggie and Charlie took a joint partnership over the business as Ronnie was in prison at that time. It officially opened on Wednesday the 9th of May 1957 and was a place for the East End people to enjoy the West End of London. There was a live music, jukebox, a car park and gymnasium and boxing ring upstairs. A large part of their fame was due to their non-criminal activities as popular figures on the celebrity circuit, being photographed by David Bailey on more than one occasion, and socialising with lords, MPs, socialites and show business characters, including actors George Cornell, Judy Garland, Diana Dors, Barbara Windsor, and singer Frank Sinatra. This increased the Krays' influence in the West End by making them celebrities as well as criminals. In the 1960s, they were widely seen as prosperous and charming celebrity nightclub owners and were part of the swinging London scene. The Krays were assisted by a banker named Alan Cooper, who wanted protection against the Krays' rivals, the Richardsons, based in South London. Reggie created a signature move called the cigarette punch. He acted as if he was going to place a cigarette in his intended target's mouth, and then hit him while his mouth was wide open. The blow was meant to make it easier to break the victim's jaw. In July 1964, an article in a Sunday Mirror newspaper claimed that Ronnie had begun a homosexual relationship with Lord Boothby, a Conservative politician. Sex between men was still a criminal offence in the UK. Although no names were printed in the piece, the twins threatened the journalist involved in the Boothby, threatened to sue the newspaper. In the face of this, the Sunday Mirror backed down, sacking its editor, printing an apology, and paying Boothby £40,000 in an out-of-court settlement. Because of this, other newspapers were unwilling to expose the Krays' connections and criminal activities. Police investigated the Krays on several occasions, but the brothers' reputation for violence made witnesses afraid to testify, and a wall of silence come up.
I like to have a bit of family life now, you know. I intend to get married in the near future. I did before this case, but it's put back over the case, and I should get married as soon as possible, you know.
Reggie married Frances Shea in 1965 at St James the Great Church, Bethnal Green. It lasted 8 months after an unhappy marriage where Reggie would stay out all night drinking and sleeping all day. She attempted suicide by taking an overdose of barbiturates. On this occasion and on one subsequent occasion, she was revived. However, on the 7th of June 1967, she committed suicide at her brother's flat in number 34 Wimborne Court, Hackney. That morning of the 7th of July 1967, he took his sister a cup of tea, as he usually did, carefully placing it on the bedside table. She seemed to be still sleeping peacefully, so he went out to work. She was later found and pronounced dead. Her parents told Reggie Kray that their daughter's last wish had been to revert to her maiden name, but Reggie Kray insisted that she be buried under her married name. Her funeral took place at St James the Great Church on Bethnal Green Road, the same church she married Reggie Kray. Ronnie shot and killed George Cornell, a member of the Richardson gang, at the Blind Beggar pub on Whitechapel on the 9th of March 1966. The day before, there had been a shootout at Mrs Smith's, a nightclub in Catford, involving the Richardsons and Richard Hart, an associate of the Krays, who was shot dead. This public shootout led to the arrest of nearly all of the Richardson gang. Cornell, by chance, was not present at the club during the shooting and was not arrested. After visiting the hospital to check up on his friends, he randomly chose to visit the Blind Beggar pub, only 1 mile away from where the Krays lived. Ronnie was drinking in another pub when he learned of Cornell's whereabouts. He went to the Blind Beggar with his driver, Scots Jack John Dixon, and his assistant, Ian Barry. Ronnie went into the pub with Barry, walked straight to Cornell, and shot him in the head in full public view. Barry, confused by what happened, fired shots in the air, warning onlookers not to report what had happened to the police. Just before he was shot, Cornell remarked, "Well, look who's here." He died at 3:30 a.m. in hospital. Ronnie was already suffering from paranoid schizophrenia at the time of the killing. According to some sources, Ronnie killed Cornell because he referred to him as a fat puff during a confrontation between the Krays and the Richardsons at the Astor Club. On the 12th of December 1966, the Krays helped Frank Mitchell, the Mad Axeman, to escape from Dartmoor prison. Ronnie had befriended Mitchell while they served time together in Wandsworth prison. Mitchell felt that the authorities should review his case for parole, so Ronnie thought that he would be doing him a favour by getting him out of Dartmoor, highlighting his case in the media and forcing the authorities to act. Once Mitchell had escaped, the Krays helped him at a friend's flat in Barking Road, East Ham. He was a large man with a mental disorder, and he was difficult to control. He disappeared. The Krays were accused of his murder, but later acquitted of any wrongdoing. Freddie Foreman, a friend of the Krays, claimed in his autobiography, Respect, that he shot Mitchell dead as a favour to the twins and disposed of his body at sea. In October 1967, 4 months after the suicide of his wife Frances, Reggie was allegedly encouraged by his brother to kill Jack the Hat McVitie, and a minor member of the Kray gang who had failed to fulfil a £1,000 contract, £500 which had been paid to him in advance to kill their financial advisor Leslie Payne. McVitie was lured to a basement flat to a party. Upon entering the premises, he saw Ronnie seated in the front room. Ronnie approached, letting loose a barrage of verbal abuse and cutting McVitie beneath his eye with a piece of broken glass. It is believed that an argument then broke out between the twins and McVitie. As the argument got more heated, Reggie pointed a handgun at McVitie's head and pulled the trigger twice, but the gun failed to discharge. McVitie was then held in a bear hug by the twins' cousin, Ronnie Hart, and Reggie was handed a carving knife. He then stabbed McVitie in the face and stomach, driving the blade into his neck while twisting the knife, not stopping as McVitie lay on the floor dying. Reggie had committed a very public murder against someone who many members of the firm felt did not deserve to die. In an interview in 2000, shortly after Reggie's death, Freddie Foreman revealed that McVitie had a reputation for leaving carnage behind him due to his use of drugs and heavy drinking, and his continuous threats to harm the twins and their family. Tony and Chris Lambriano and Ronnie Bender helped clear up the evidence of this crime and attempted to assist in the disposal of the body. While McVitie's corpse, being too big to fit in the boot of the car, it was wrapped in an eiderdown and put in the back seat. Tony Lambriano drove the car with his body, and Chris Lambriano and Bender followed behind, crossing the Blackwall Tunnel. Chris lost Tony's car and spent up to 15 minutes looking around the area. They found Tony outside St Mary's Church where he had run out of fuel. McVitie's body still in the car. The body was left in the car and the 3 gangsters returned home. Bender then phoned Charlie Kray, informing them that it had been dealt with. When the Krays heard where they had left McVitie's corpse, the twins were livid and desperately phoned Foreman, who was then running a pub, to see if he could dispose of the body. With dawn breaking, Foreman found the car, broke into it and drove the body to New Haven, where with the help of a trawler man, the body was bound with chicken wire and dumped in the English Channel. This event started turning many people against the Krays, and some were prepared to testify to Scotland Yard as to what had happened, fearing that what happened to McVitie could easily happen to them. Scotland Yard decided to arrest the Krays in the hope that other witnesses would be forthcoming once the Krays were in custody. On the 8th of March 1968, Detective Chief Superintendent Leonard "Nipper" Reid and his team arrested the Krays and 15 other members of the firm. Exceptional measures were used to stop collusion between the accused. Nipper Reid then secretly interviewed each of the arrested and offered each member of the firm a deal if they testified against the others. Whilst in prison, the Krays had come up with a plan, which included having Scotch Jack Dixon to confess to the murder of Cornell, Ronnie Hart to take the McVitie murder. Ronnie Hart had initially not been arrested and was not a name initially sought after by the police. With Donohue's testimony, Hart was arrested, offered the same terms as the others. Hart then read everything that had happened during McVitie's murder, although he did not know anything about what had happened to the body. This was the first time that the police knew exactly who was involved and offered them a solid case to prosecute the twins for McVitie's murder. Although Reid knew for certain that Ronnie Kray had murdered George Cornell in the Blind Beggar pub, no one had been prepared to testify against the twins out of fear. Upon finding out the twins intended to cajole him, Scotch Jack Dixon also turned in everything he knew about Cornell's murder. Although not a witness to the murder, he was an accessory, having driven Ronnie Kray and Ian Barry to the pub. The police still needed a witness to the murder. They managed to track down the barmaid who was working in the pub at the time of the murder, gave her a secret identity, and she testified to seeing Ronnie kill Cornell. The twins' defence under their counsel, John Platts Mills QC, consisted of flat denials of all charges and discrediting witnesses by pointing out that their criminal past. Justice Melford Stevenson said, "In my view, society has earned a rest from your activities. It was the longest murder hearing in the history of the British criminal justice, during which Justice Melford Stevenson stated of the sentences, 'I recommend they should not be less than 30 years. Ronnie and Reggie Kray were allowed under a large police guard to attend the funeral service of their mother Violet on the 11th of August 1982, following her death from cancer a week earlier. They were not allowed to attend her burial in the Kray family plot at Chingford Mount Cemetery. The funeral was attended by celebrities including Diana Dors and underworld figures known to the Krays. To avoid the publicity that had surrounded their mother's funeral, the twins did not ask for permission to attend their father's funeral in March 1983. Ronnie Kray was a Category A prisoner, denied almost all liberties and not allowed to mix with other prisoners. He was eventually certified insane, his paranoid schizophrenia being tempered with constant medication. In 1979 he was committed and lived the remainder of his life in Broadmoor Hospital in Crowthorne, Berkshire. Reggie Kray, constantly being refused parole, was locked up in Maidstone Prison for 8 years. In 1997 he was transferred to the Category C Wayland Prison in Norfolk. Ronnie Kray died on the 17th of March 1995 at the age of 61 at Wexham Park Hospital in Slough, Berkshire. He had suffered a heart attack at Broadmoor Hospital 2 days earlier. Reggie Kray was allowed out of prison in handcuffs to attend the funeral. Charlie Kray, Ronnie and Reggie's older brother, was released from prison in 1975 after serving 7 years of his 10-year sentence for his role in the gangland crimes. Charlie was sentenced to 12 years imprisonment in 1997 for conspiracy to smuggle cocaine in an undercover drug sting. He died in prison of natural causes on the 4th of April 2000, aged 72, with Reggie allowed out of his prison to attend his older brother's funeral. Reggie Kray died from terminal cancer after being released from prison on compassionate grounds, aged 66, on the 1st of October 2000. During his sentence, Reggie Kray became a born-again Christian. He was freed from Wayland on the 26th of August 2000 on compassionate grounds on the direction of Home Secretary Jack Straw, following a diagnosis of cancer. He had been diagnosed with bladder cancer earlier that year, and the illness had been declared as terminal. The final weeks of his life were spent with his wife of 3 years, Roberta, in a suite at the Townhouse Hotel at Norwich. 10 days after his death, he was buried beside his brother Ronnie in Chingford Mount Cemetery. During the funeral, crowds of thousands lined up to applaud.